What is surprisingly still legal in 2019? According to this source, discover Canadian lawyer's webpage. In Calgary, if released from prison, it is required that you are given a handgun with bullets and a horse, so you can ride out of town. Seems reasonable. A newly released person has neither transportation nor a way to defend themselves. The big shiny download button, which is really not the download button, and when clicked, takes you to this page which claims that my Mac has been infected by a virus and now I need to download their software to save it. Always gotta hover your mouse over all 6 download buttons to check the URLs. It's so annoying. From my experience, the real download button is almost always the least flashy one. Telemarketing. On top of political, I got on some list and get 25/week asking if I want to sell my house. GRRR. For real. Telemarketing was absolutely out of control in the late 90s. Then they introduced the no-call lists, which helped but didn't solve the problem. Then people switched to cell phones and ditched landlines, and for a while I thought the problem was pretty much solved. Now I get like a dozen scam-likely calls a day and the FCC doesn't do shit about it. I've cut down a lot of these by blocking numbers as they come in. Hasn't solved the problem obviously, since they're always new or fudged, but I'd say in 5 years of blocking they've gone down by 90%. Unfortunately, I'm worried about just outright blocking any number that is a spam call because of the use of number spoofing. It's totally possible that one day you get a spam call from a number, but then that number turns out to be a legitimate business that is trying to contact you. I just don't answer random numbers anymore. If a call is important, they can leave a message and I'll get back to them. Civil forfeiture, in which the government can take your assets if you're just suspected of a crime, under the pretense that said assets were related to the crime. Charges may never be filed, but the assets may be kept if you can't definitively prove that the assets were not involved in any crime. You essentially have to prove your assets' innocence in order to get them back. Guilty until proven innocent. Alright, you're innocent, but your shit is guilty AF. The argument is literally we're taking legal action against your stuff. Your stuff doesn't have constitutional protections like people do. That's how we end up with such classics as United States v. Article, consisting of 50,000 cardboard boxes more or less, each containing one pair of clackables. United States v. Article, consisting of 50,000 cardboard boxes more or less, each containing one pair of clackables. Wikipedia webpage. I didn't realize legal titles could be a source of humor. Thank you for this. The more or less part is what does it for me. It's like the guy in charge of counting everything was just like, screw it. Close enough. How about United States v. approximately 64,695 pounds of shark fins. Wikipedia webpage. It was fine when it was hey there's a large pile of drugs and cash here and everyone around says, not mine. Yeah, in that case the stuff is guilty and has no claimants. But now they stop people on the freeway and take their cash when no crime is even suspected. Canada literally warned citizens to not bring cash in the US because cops are preying on them at the borders. At this point the real criminal are cops, the department, and anyone else pushing for more of this. I've been watching this show called Border Wars, and while a lot of what they do is good, holy shit, a lot is so terrible. I get that when you exit one country and enter another, you are not a citizen and may not have the rights of a citizen, but the shit they pull is so over the top and unfairly applied. One guy brings in $18,000 without declaring it. You're supposed to declare anything over $10,000 when entering the US. They threaten that they can take the money, and then end up fining him $100. And then a young woman accidentally crosses the border, I believe US side to Canada side, because she missed the exit, and they do a full secondary investigation, including going through her purse, car, cell phone, pat down, etc. They find 3 Adderall capsules, one of which has broken. OMG, you would have thought they caught her raping babies. Do you have a prescription for this Schedule X controlled narcotic? I always hate that they refer to every single drug as a narcotic. Meth is not a narcotic. Ecstasy is not a narcotic. The poor girl says yes, she has a prescription, tries and fails to reach the pharmacy, and then says she had a prescription but it's expired now. She's crying and just looks beaten. Finally, they say this is a crime for the local jurisdiction, and one of the border cops calls the local police to see if they are interested in coming to the border and arresting her for 2.5 Adderalls. And you can pretty much hear them laughing on the other end. Border Patrol comes back and says the local police aren't interested, so you can go now. What idiots. I can see there are a few that seem to have their heads on straight and aren't just throwing their weight around, but a lot of them are clearly getting off on the power. They also require you to allow them access to your phone, all your texts, photos, etc. It just seems excessively invasive. I hear a court recently ruled against that access without probable cause, but I'm sure the Border Patrol will just make some weak probable cause argument and continue. Also, if you are coming from another country into the US, you are not allowed legal representation. It's enough to make me really fear these people. Edit. Even though I'm a law-abiding system, they have laws I've never heard of. So the next time I go through an international border, I'm going to clear my texts, sign out of my cloud photos and erase any on my phone, sign out of email, just sterilize my phone. Oh, and don't bring meat through. That's just gross. I get that when you exit one country and enter another, you are not a citizen and may not have the rights of a citizen. In theory, if you're visiting the US, you have pretty much all the same rights as a citizen. The rights you don't have are mostly related to things like jobs and voting, so they're not relevant to a visitor. I think it's one of the cases where theory is pretty close to practice. We just treat our citizens so badly that foreigners might have a hard time believing we do the same shit to citizens. It ends up being legalized theft a lot of time. If something comes up missing or damaged, it's an uphill battle to replace it. For most people that actually have to deal with it, it's not worth the time or effort. It's one of the scummiest legal practices I've ever heard of. I spent some time in the evidence storage of a larger police department, and there's a bunch of random stuff spanning decades, including drugs and cash, which was obviously kept in a more secure section. So the legal argument here is that you are not being charged, the asset is being charged, and since inanimate objects don't have rights, go fuck yourself. And they can freeze your assets during the forfeiture proceedings, so that you can't actually use your money to hire a lawyer. Lots of civil asset forfeiture attorneys have learned to game the system by asserting a lien on the assets as their fee. This way, they have to be satisfied before the government gets their share. Agreed. But we have been making progress there. Reason webpage. That's only one judge from SC1 state out of 50 states. 90% plus of states in USA still have this oppressive rule. No argument. I said we were making progress. Prior to this, it was 50 out of 50 states. According to the article, New Mexico, Nebraska, and North Carolina have completely eliminated civil asset forfeiture. South Carolina is in the process of legislating a ban, but the original bill had wording issues and the revised bill won't be voted on until next legislative session. So 3 states, working on a 4th. This happens a lot with poker players. They win cash, get pulled over, cash gets taken cause it's probably drug money. Absolute bullshit. I saw an article where a guy was going to buy a car and was pulled over. He had like 20 grand in cash that he was going to use to buy the car, and the police took it because he couldn't prove it wasn't drug money. We'll look for article. Update. Don't think this News Channel 5 webpage was it, but just goes to show how often it happens. I read somewhere that is why stereotypical pimps would have gold chains, fur coats etc, so that if they got arrested their money could get taken but not their clothing, jewelry etc, and that is what they would pawn to get money to be bailed out of jail etc. Can they still steal people's homes just because their kids sold a dime bag of weed? Yeah, or if their kids throw an underage drinking party while the parents are away. And if you do prove your innocence, your stack of cash may have already ended up in the police station's pension fund and you can't get it back. Scalping. Particularly the large-scale schemes perpetuated by Ticketmaster or artists in an attempt to make a few extra dishonest bucks. For a second I thought you meant taking the scalps of natives and turning them in for a bounty, lol. For those who don't know, scalping is the practice of buying some product, usually sports or concert tickets, in large numbers to create a false scarcity, and then reselling them at an inflated price. It's not false scarcity. Almost all scalping is taking advantage of real scarcity. Scalping is just buying tickets for resale. I care less about scalping than the crazy inflated service fees companies like Ticketmaster charge for purchases. They're literal thieves. That depends on where you are. Scalping and selling tickets above face value in Denver is actually illegal. For-profit prisons, 100 years after they finally end, they'll be looked upon with the same horror we look at, say, using children as chimney sweeps. It's worse than you think. The 13th Amendment ended slavery, except as a punishment for a duly convicted crime. Shortly after the Civil War, Jim Crow laws targeting blacks sprung up, and disproportionate targeting of blacks by law enforcement continues today. For-profit prisons are literally the legal, modern enslavement of Americans, particularly black Americans. In the South, it even still includes forced plantation labor. The whole prison system is fucked while that line remains in the 13th Amendment. Being an elderly driver. No, I do not mean 85-year-old people who are borderline. In 2019 in the US you could be 107 and bedbound with a still legitimate driver's license. You can't walk, but you can still cruise around in your 2002 Mercury if you want. What's interesting to me is that if someone keeps practicing driving at a high level they can keep going basically until they die, yet so many elderly people don't put in an effort, leading to them slowly declining in skill until they can't even commute safely. There's a 93-year-old that does club races at our local track, which is rated one of the most dangerous tracks in the world, and he does it year after year without incident. He's old enough that he has to get a physical mental checkup every 6 months to keep his racing license. I only have to do that every 5 years. That's pretty much my dad. He's 84 and raced his entire life. I guarantee he's more attentive and has more driving ability than 99% of people on the road. There are exactly 2 things in the world everyone unanimously agrees they are above average at: and those things are driving and laser tag. I'm actually not very good at the shooting part of laser tag. That's why I always bring a knife. Yo, but for real, I ain't scared to school a child in some laser tag. The key is to go for the eye first, target second. Disabled younger people can drive. That said, I argued that my 85-year-old dad should still be allowed to drive after he hit a mailbox, because he always got joy from going out for a drive. My sister said, "Today a mailbox, tomorrow a mom with a stroller." She won. Unfortunately, his joy is irrelevant to the safety of others. Your sister was right. How was the drive, Pops? I got joy. Great. Not really. Joy's family and her insurance company are both suing me. Sounds like you were trying to make an extremely stupid argument. Glad your sister won. His joy is irrelevant to the safety of the general public. Your sister was right, and age does play a large factor in your ability to take in information around you at the speed driving requires. As you get older, the cones and rods in the peripherals of your eyes start to die and can't send as detailed information to your brain. Basically, your field of view gets narrower, and your peripheral vision gets wider. It doesn't matter a lot of the time in normal day life with the life that elderly typically led. However, driving requires a high-level use of your full field of vision to, say, merge safely. For example, I personally have a lot of opinions about the US driving test and license system, but without getting into all of that, the elderly should 100% have a specialized test to confirm they can still safely operate a moving vehicle, even if that's just an eye exam every few years. My 89-year-old grandma thinks that red lights are a suggestion and goes through them. She's 100% mentally sound, but I have been trying to convince my mom to get her license taken away. Most police forces will take phone calls from someone in your situation and put a watch out for the car. If it does anything illegal and safe, they'll pull it over, give her a roadside test and pull her license. One of the most interesting arguments I heard on this was during a stream by Squirrel Twitch webpage. The older British streamer who likes to play games like Euro Truck Simulator and the like. He was discussing, while driving a semi on stream, how silly it is that in America there is no retesting for driver's licenses. He likened it to how pilots have to keep retesting to make sure they are up to snuff yearly, yet drivers never do. It was discussed how he feels we should retest for driving knowledge, but how the barrier for something like that to pass would be tough. Why? His very thought-provoking conversation was about how it would be hard to get retesting passed if it would affect the elderly. Most people in our political system are older and would more than likely not want to pass laws that would affect them in the near future, especially negatively. And it was a very interesting thought that we do not retest for driving ability, even if laws or signage changes over the years. I think we would benefit from it. I think it would be hard to get a bill like that even proposed based on the average age of lawmakers. It seems as though we are screwed on this issue. Selling a college textbook for $200, and then not fucking binding it like a book. I just found out my statistics book, near end of semester BTW, shows how much I fucking needed it. Has no binding, but is 3-hole punch 900 fucking papers unbound that they sold ME, and have the audacity to expect ME to buy a binder for a book. We have book bags. That's where books go. They should need a fucking binder. They should already be bound. Pugs. Breeding pugs. Those poor animals go through so much pain, literally living is suffering. Overbred. Overmutated. There needs to be license or temp breeding ban on them. any breeding farms really. Pugs are just one of the more extreme examples. We adopted a pug after her owner died. She always had breathing issues and would get breathless after a few minutes walking. We gave her the best life we could and she lived to be 14, which is a pretty good age for a pug. Poor thing died of a heart attack in the end. Edit. I should also defend her previous owner. She was an unwanted pet and the owner took her in and cared for her. That pug was devastated when she passed away. Don't forget puppy mills. People want puppies, so pet stores buy pups and the ones that don't get sold are shipped off to the pound to make room for newer puppies. Agreed. It has come to a point where a lot of them die pretty young because of breathing issues. Any dog that needs a cesarean to give birth should be spayed during the operation. It is cruel to breed animals that can't naturally reproduce without extreme intervention. French bulldogs are turning into the same thing. From what I've seen, pugs are becoming less popular and Frenchies are replacing them. I work at a pet store, and I've had cases with both breeds where I can hear them struggling to breathe from the other side of the store. It makes me sick, especially when the owners think it's cute. While slavery is illegal, there is still a huge amount of things which we buy that are produced by slaves or by people paid a tiny wage, but who are essentially still slaves in all but name. I really wish that there was some kind of law in place to punish the sale of goods produced by slavery, child labor, or workers without adequate pay and adequate rights. Using tear gas against enemy combatants, illegal. Using tear gas against your own citizens, totally illegal. Well, presumably the tear gas isn't going to be followed by flamethrowers in one of the cases, but it's becoming harder and harder to say these days. Price gouging on life-saving meds, insulin, EpiPens, cancer drugs, etc. Actually, that isn't legal anymore. Trump admin changed the rules. Insulin prices. How Trump's proposal aims to lower drug costs. Complaints from patients and diabetes advocacy groups about the high cost of insulin are finally being addressed. Earlier this week Eli announced plans to sell Humalog at half price. Here's how we got here and a summary of how the current administration plans to lower drug costs webpage. This is old but it is done now. Smoking whilst having your kids in your car. I knew a dad who only opened his car window just enough to toss his ashes, and closed them in between cause this wind is bad for my neck. Meanwhile we were dying in the back. Big Pharma charging 10x more for the same medicine in the US than the rest of the world. US is a fucking shithole in medicine. Everything is expensive as fuck. I'd rather die from a disease than having to sell everything just to heal, and realize that since I have nothing I'll need to work more and probably develop more problems because of it. Even if you have insurance you still get fucked up the ass. My best friend's fiancé was diagnosed with stage 5 stomach cancer right after they got engaged. She's a teacher and had good insurance. Supposedly the ACA banned annual caps on insurance payouts, but her company still found some way to limit payments to $100 a year, and it's gotten to the point she had to do Kickstarter type shit. They went and talked to financial advisor or lawyer or someone who basically told them she would have to declare bankruptcy eventually and they shouldn't get married because it would absolutely destroy my best friend's finances 4 years after she was gone. And I repeat, she had insurance. That's the thing about our system. It isn't just dysfunctional, it's cruel. And all that blood is on the hands of our politicians, especially the Republican Party, whose only healthcare plan is to obstruct whatever Democrats try to pass. That's the thing about our system. It isn't just dysfunctional, it's cruel. And all that blood is on the hands of our politicians, especially the Republican Party, whose only healthcare plan is to obstruct whatever Democrats try to pass. Personally, I think our health insurance industry's behaviors ought to be considered acts of war. We should be invading insurance companies' headquarters instead of blowing up brown people who didn't do anything to us. Class war is literal war sometimes, and it's being waged against us, and we're losing. I completely agree. If things were like this in Europe, the streets would go up in flames. The one thing I never understand about the US, they claim they need their guns in case the government turned on them, so they can protect themselves, yet they let them do this to their families. I would like to see some farmer and insurance execs literally hang, and it would probably turn things around. For starters, I would do the Sacklers for the opioid crisis they caused, and after that I would dissolve their entire wealth and give it back to the people. Wake up, America. In India, there are no laws against marital rape, so it's technically legal to rape your husband. Campaign bribes, contributions to politicians. Money is speech. Nos. Could we just do away entirely with PACs and super PACs? Seems like that'd do a lot of good in terms of politicians respecting the views of their constituents in lieu of the lobbyists funding their re-election campaigns. Edit. To clarify, what I'd really like to see is the abolishment of PACs' ability to contribute monetarily to campaigns. Well, we could, but the people who would need to change the laws are the people benefiting from their current state. Some of those at workforces. That when women get surgery they default consent to receiving a full pelvic exam. They have medical students come in and do all the tests. There can be multiple students doing it and they don't even have to tell you they did that. Edit to at. One source talking about it before a relevant procedure, US News webpage, and one talking about it before other, irrelevant procedures. Pelvic exams on anesthetized women without consent. A troubling and outdated practice webpage. Number 3 AE 61 FCF 7846. I just had endometrial ablation surgery. It destroys your uterine lining to eliminate your periods. I half-jokingly told me, "Doc, hey, don't let any med students do any pelvic exams on me when I'm unconscious," and he assured me that this hospital has never allowed that, and that it's a terrible violation of patient rights and that he'd absolutely never let that happen to me. He also said it's a practice that's dying out. I was kidding, but he still made me feel better. I just met this dude in October. New Geno, my old one moved, but he's pretty great. When I had a kidney transplant earlier this year, the surgeon asked if it was okay if a couple of residents were there to watch and or assist. I agreed. I'm always in favor of students learning what they need to do and have no issue being a participant. Verbally informed consent needs to be the norm, not terms and conditions consent. Excessive product packaging. You buy a box of cereal only to find a bag of cereal inside it. Don't even get me started on the fact that it's only half full. Then there's the theft proof, customer proof, plastic clamshell packaging that you have to risk life and limb while trying to open with a razor blade. And then you have the child proof, elderly proof, pill bottles. We have a freaking island of plastic garbage floating in the Pacific Ocean, and what I mentioned above is why. You buy a box of cereal only to find a bag of cereal inside it. While I agree with your general point, isn't the bag there because it's airtight, as opposed to a cardboard box? Mega churches being untaxed. Edit. My favorite comment reply to this so far. Nothing stops you from going around to these churches and taking the money yourself. So why don't you? Silly people we have in this world. It would be really difficult to write legislation that fixes this. I mean, What makes a megachurch? Sounds completely reasonable to start taxing any church with a private jet or a jumbotron. But I guarantee you, if it becomes constitutional to tax a religion for specific items, on day one, Oklahoma and Tennessee will slap a 10,000% tax on any establishment that uses prayer mats. The Conversation webpage. You could tax a church by what they pay the pastor, but most of these mega church pastors don't actually draw an outrageous salary. The plane belongs to the church, and their income comes from book deals. You might start taxing any organization that clears a certain threshold for assets, but that would basically punish all organized religion and encourage those little storefront hoot and holler churches. Not that there's anything wrong with those places, but legislation really shouldn't pick winners and losers in the religious sphere. A simple alternative would be to tax all churches as corporations, but that would effectively shut down most urban churches. I know that Reddit is super edgy and euphoric, but that's probably a political non-starter. Yeah, writing good laws is way harder than it seems, and it usually takes multiple revisions after you see how they work in practice. When I was in law school, the first day of my criminal law class, the professor had us all take out a piece of paper and try to write a law to outlaw a specific kind of behavior. I forget what the behavior actually was. We all wrote them and then handed them in, and he went through them one by one, read them, and then pointed out ambiguities, loopholes, unintended consequences, and ways the law could lead to miscarriages of justice. Literally nobody had written a law that would actually have been effective without substantial amendments. It was pretty eye-opening. There's a reason so much federal legislation is hundreds of pages long. They're trying to cover every possible angle and think of every unintended consequence the law could have. That's a really cool exercise that would take a moderator who knew a lot about law in order for it to work. Props to your professor. You can do a lot of shit that's otherwise illegal if you just say that it's religion. Avoid taxes. Have your kid undergo medical procedures that they don't need. Have your child not undergo medical procedures that they do need. Child marriage. Dog shows, where they keep inbreeding dogs for a certain trait appearance regardless of the known health issues that causes. I don't own a dog, so not sure how bad it is. It's pretty bad. Bulldog pups are often too large for the birth canal, and a bulldog webpage, meaning that some require C-sections to avoid the deaths of both the bitch and the pup. That's just one example. Pugs have breathing difficulties. Labradors are genetically prone to hip and elbow dysplasia. Same with German Shepherds. And toy dog breeds like Yorkshire Terriers are more likely to suffer from tracheal collapse. I found this page, Healthline webpage, which discusses common health concerns for 12 popular dog breeds. It's not just dogs either. Cat breeds can have specific requirements to comply with show rules. Persian cats have the same flat-end face as pugs, and suffer the same breathing issues. Some reputable breeders are working to breed these defects out, but this takes time, and it's not always easy to find a good breeder from a bad one that's just in it for the money. Pedigree animals can fetch big money, and doesn't care about the welfare of their animals. Depends on the kind of dog. Some are really bad while some have almost no problems like that. Child beauty pageants. Smoking, drinking while pregnant. Arranged marriages. Child marriage. Can't digest the fact that it's still legal in some places. In Michigan it is technically against the law for a woman to cut her hair without her husband's permission. This is commonly believed, but is actually a myth. There was a court case in 1940s where the court found that a woman's hair, that she had sold to be used for wigs, was not her sole property. but was part of the marital estate and was subject to the few coverture laws that still existed in Michigan at the time. Coverture is an old common law principle that said that a married woman's property was controlled by her husband. Michigan had started abolishing it in 1844, and it was entirely abolished by 1963. So it is fully legal for a woman to cut her hair. If you can't park it, you can still buy and drive it. Edit. Cars. If you are unable to park a car, truck, van, semi-pants or whatever, you shouldn't be driving it. Paternity fraud. If I tried to steal 18 years of revenue from anyone by any other method, I'd be thrown in jail. But a woman can claim a guy's the father of a child, knowing he isn't, and receive a sizable portion of his income for the better part of 2 decades. It's even worse in France, where paternity testing is banned in order to save the family. France is now literally the land of the cuckolds. Irish Times webpage. IBDNA webpage. Sick people still coming to work, school, and when ill people come back, if they choose to stay home, they are mentally ill because of the work they left behind. Why couldn't bosses accept the fact that we are human beings instead of a tool for their successes? SMH. Eminent domain. Basically states the government can seize your property as long as they compensate you fairly for it, except the government decides how much a fair amount is. It's usually used when the government needs to build infrastructure like highways and bridges. It's a huge infraction of freedom of property, but a necessary evil, because without it, no major infrastructure would ever get built. Imagine that every highway or dam would be delayed by 40 years and up because the government would need to wait until some stubborn farmer croaked, and then just pray that the heirs will give in. Also useful when a real estate developer who has friends on city council wants to build a new strip mall. Eminent domain that shit. It's still legal in 31 states within the US to discriminate against homosexuality, meaning you can fire someone and list the official reason as them being gay. In some parts of Japan and some other Asian countries, the legal age for consent and marriage is 13 years old. Edit. The legal age for marriage is 16 and 18. It's even lower in other countries. In the Philippines and Angola, the age of consent is 12, and in Nigeria, the age of consent is 11. In Afghanistan, Iran, Kuwait, Libya, the Maldives, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen, sex outside of marriage is outlawed, but with forced arranged marriages being common in those countries. Girls as young as 8 or 9 can be forced into a marriage and therefore have consensual sex under the law. On the contrary, South Korea has a very high age of consent at 20, and Bahrain is even higher at 21, making it the highest in the world. Repeating popular AskReddit questions that have been asked a million times just to farm karma. Why not? Not everyone uses Reddit for years and reads every thread ever. Giving farm animals and natural lives in boxes where they can barely move. Advertising alcoholic beverages to drivers on the road, whether it be on the side of a truck or a billboard indicating that cause is sold at the next exit, with bottles sticking out of ice and dripping with condensation. If I were an alcoholic, I would be tempted to pull off for a drink, pretending wineries are any different, as well. Same shit. Free tasting room ahead, UHG. Radio ads and music on the radio featuring honks, sirens, and screeching tires. The practice of making a video game, selling it, and then shutting down the server several years later, making it nearly impossible to play. If you shut the servers down, You should just release all your source code so people can run their own servers if they want. USA doesn't have ugly pics on packs of smokes, nor does it have the generic number on the cig instead of branding. Really doesn't make a difference, to be honest. In Australia there are those photos and I have friends that literally use it as a joke. Almost like collecting cards. Oh, what did you get? I got unborn baby. OHH, you got the black lungs? Damn, I haven't seen that one yet. What stops smokers here most of the times is the price. A 25 pack will set you back usually around 25 to 30 odd. Most of the research on this, however, does indicate that those pictures do work as a deterrent for people who are not yet smoking, while price impacts the people who are already smoking regularly. As you correctly pointed out, the packaging, branding, or lack thereof, shows to deter younger people from starting to smoke, so it does have its use. I can't believe that typos on public signage are legal in this day and age. Now, look, I know that most folks don't really care about writing well on the internet, but if you're creating a piece of physical media like a billboard or a road sign, you really need to proofread the text before you put it out there. Literally every time that I go outside, I see everyday being used in place of everyday. I see one-word nouns like breakdown being used in place of two-word verb phrases like breakdown. I see quotation marks being used for emphasis when a company advertises big savings on Tuesday, for instance, and if I had $1 for every misused or missing hyphen that I encounter, or fail to encounter, as the case may be, I'd probably be able to fund the development of a punctuation shooting weapon of some variety. If I had my way, we'd see the creation of the RAI, the Writing Rules Enforcement Agency. This organization would be tasked with creating a universal style guide, then policing violations of it. Typos on public signage would incur steep fines, along with orders to immediately fix the errors, and citizens would be able to collect bounties on any errors they might happen to see, while private individuals would still be allowed to write in any way that they saw fit. All other text-based communication would be subject to intense scrutiny, and would likely leave some companies screaming rear. It should go without saying that the uniforms would be designed by Hugo Boss. TLDR. We need actual grammar Nazis to combat the alt-right's influence. Tobacco products. I'm a smoker and even I know that tobacco should have been outlawed long ago. Because making any drug illegal has never worked. Making it illegal would only create a black market for it. That'd be literally just stupid. Edit. Please use your brain before applying to my comment. Please. It seems like no one does. Reddit. Legalize weed. Also Reddit. Ban this other plant that I don't like as much. Not a smoker BTW. I think it's disgusting. Watermelons. As a pineapple guy, I fucking hate watermelons and I fucking hate the people who eat watermelons. You can just drink water and eat melons instead of watermelons. Don't waste your money on watermelons. Try pineapples. It is more delicious than watermelons. Pineapples are the uncircumcised devil cocks of the fruit world. Why get acid burns on the inside of your mouth when you can have a nice refreshing watermelon instead? Watermelon Masterace.